Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Ask Olaf the Violinmaker, and today it really is an episode of Ask Olaf because I put out a post asking if anyone had any questions and I got back a whole heap of questions, so I'm going to try and answer as many as possible. I'm definitely going to answer 20 questions, so this will be 20 questions by Olaf the Violinmaker. By the way, do you like my t-shirt? My daughter designed it. I had a t-shirt a little while ago. I had a t-shirt which said, "I am the Lorax, I speak for the trees," and my daughter just made a slight change to it. So it's pretty cute, I think. So let's get straight into the questions. So the first few questions are about me. So first question is, hi Annalicia, thank you for the question. With being around violins every day, do you ever play them? How do you rate your skills? Yes, I definitely play violins. I love playing. Rating my skills, if I practice more, I could be pretty good. I don't practice enough, but I do play a lot. I have a lot of fun and I do a little bit of practice, but I mostly play for fun. And I quite often when I get a nice instrument, I'll actually play it way too much. So I'll just keep playing and playing. Which is more lucrative, repairing or making violins? I think making violins is probably more lucrative because it's a lot cleaner. You can, there are no, when you're repairing violins or restoring violins especially, you come up against a lot of little problems, which, when you make your new instrument, you shouldn't, because, you're starting with a clean slate and you do everything the right way. I'm almost finished with my instrument too, which is very exciting. Ricky asked, how long did it take you to learn your craft? Well, I learned a lot in the first 3 years. So I learned a lot of skills. The really hard thing is tool skills. So I learned a lot in the first 3 years. I think I started mastering things after about 10 years. But I've never stopped learning. I'm still learning new stuff. I have conversations with my dad, other makers. I invent things. So I'm continuing to learn all the time. And my craft, like the craft of violin making, is actually, that's an important part. But really understanding string players, that was actually the thing that challenged me most after about 10 years. It was something I hadn't really got, that I wasn't actually really good at, so it really challenged me. Okay, now we have questions about violin making. Zeus asked me, what is one thing an aspiring luthier should know? I'm going to tell you more than one thing. So first thing, if you're thinking about doing violin making, and I'm going to talk mostly about violin making because I'm not a huge, I don't know as much about guitar making and other instruments, but a big thing is learn how to use the tools really well and make sure you work with extremely sharp tools. So before you even become a violin maker, it's worth, knowing how to use planes, chisels, gouges, and hand knives. So do a bit of carving or something like that. That's a really good skill to have before you even start. Jeff asked, I'm told great sashimi chefs will go to the market and spot exceptional fish to purchase, hence the quality of their food. Is there a similar process when a luthier chooses a timber to build their precious instruments? Much respect. Thank you, Jeff. Absolutely. So I'm very careful about choosing my timber. I do a sound test on each piece of wood I buy. I recently bought some timber from the same valley in Italy where Stradivarius got his wood from. And yeah, I like to listen to the sound of each piece of timber because it's got to have a nice ringing quality, especially the top plate. Can you explain to me why the viola, in contrast to the violin and cello, is constructed suboptimally for projection? It's not. You know, you may find violas that don't project as well, but you can also find violas that project very well. Personally, I actually like a little bit smaller violas. I think they project a lot better. And also they're a lot easier to play and you don't get any injuries, or not as many injuries, or you don't get injuries as easily. Daniel, my luthier refused to build a Testore model because he said that's a beginner violin. Is that true? No. Testore were some really incredible makers that lived in Milan in the late 1600s and early, even till the end of 1700s. They made a bunch of really, they were very good makers. There are four well-known makers. The grandfather, there were two sons, and then one of them had another son called Pietro, and they made beautiful instruments, and there was nothing wrong with their models. So I have no idea, but you know, violin makers do have personal preferences in models, and so maybe that was just a model the maker didn't want to make. Jim, do you think a violin maker has to keep secrets of the varnish recipe or building methods? Do you keep secrets? I do have some secrets. You know, sometimes you do need a bit of an edge. I'm fairly open about most of the things I do, but I don't disclose my exact varnish recipe. I don't disclose the exact way I tune instruments and the way I work on a shape of an instrument to create a specific sound. Each maker also has to have a little bit of a competitive edge, and we spend years working out certain things, and I think, you know, I will definitely make sure this gets passed on. There are some secrets. Yes, I keep secrets. Okay, not many, but there are some. I got a. Now we're going to move on to the setup and things like that. I had a bunch of questions about pegs. Look up my peg video, and the video, I made a video about 11 years ago explaining how to put on a string, and that goes in great detail on how the pegs work. And I had the other one, something like help my pegs are slipping or my pegs are sticking or something like that. Look that one up as well, and you'll learn a lot about pegs. I'll try and put the link in here. So next question is about the sound post. Can you tell me how I determine the height of the sound post? Also the angle. Do I sand the sound post or cut it? How do I do that? Where do you put the sound post? There are so many questions. Look, I'm probably going to I'll have to do a whole video about a sound post. I don't think I've done it already. But it's a very exact science. I do hand fit every sound post. I work out the length with a special tool that I put inside the instrument to measure the length. Then I fit the sound post using my carving knives. I don't use sandpaper. And sometimes the sound post can end up a little slightly angled, but that's for a reason. So like moving the sound post by a fraction of a millimeter will have a dramatic effect in the sound. And so I do little taps and I move the sound post to get the absolute optimal position for each instrument. And so yes, it can sometimes be at a slight angle because that sounds best for that particular instrument. Violin Varnish, Juan, thanks for the question. They bought a Gliga and noticed a blob of varnish imperfection on the back, and they asked the seller about it, and they said something, it's hand-applied varnish, it's not something that can be damaged unless you ever scratch it with a knife. Look, varnish, let me just see. You can get varnish imperfections as the instrument is varnished. Like most instruments are handmade, so you know that kind of sometimes becomes a little bit of the character of the instrument. But the maker here, or the person talks that spray-on varnish, like cheap nitro violins, isn't very good for the sound. They're definitely right there. Then the spray-on varnish really isn't good for the sound at all. But if there is damage to the varnish, if it's a new instrument, there should be some form of warranty if it really worries you. Now I had a few questions about bows, so I'll touch on those. I always wanted to know if it's bad for the violin bow when when musicians are tapping their music stands with it instead of clapping with their hands. That is a ridiculous thing to do with a bow. I know plenty of players who've actually $60,000, $100,000 bows. There's no way you should tap your bow on anything. Like when you have a valuable bow like that, even some of the, there's some pieces of music that ask the player to hit the strings with the other side, like with the timber of the bow. That also isn't very good for the bow. Use something different. Use a pencil or something. Yeah, if you've got a really good bow, don't do it. If you've got a cheaper bow, it's not a worry. Some of the carbon fiber bows actually are quite hardy, so that might be okay, but don't do that to a good bow. It's terrible. What's the proper way to rosin a bow? Is it true that after some time of using the bow, we should clean the bow hair, and how do you do it? It's pretty hard to do, cleaning the bow hair. I do it with water, but, there's all sorts of risks of actually damaging the bow. So I'd get your luthier to do it. Also, after a while, bow hair actually wears. So each hair on the bow has little bristles on them, and they wear off after some playing. And then the bow doesn't sound as good. So you can tell by when you look across a bow, say you've got a bow and you look across the hair, if the hair's all shiny, you probably need a rehair. Proper way to rosin the bow. I'm going to use the new Leatherwood rosin here. It's the Leatherwood Eco rosin. I really like it. I've been using it. Anyway, just if you like it. Also, I really like Melos, but the proper way to rosin your bow is don't over rosin it. If your violin sounds scratchy after you've rosined, you've probably got too much rosin on there. But you always put more rosin on the ends of the bow here. So you rosin the ends first, go through, rosin this end, go through. So the ends, you always put more rosin on. And you do this just a few times, maybe 5-6 times, but learn to become sensitive to how much you need to rosin the bow, because you can actually, you should be able to hear the difference. And there's a sweet spot, like you can over rosin a bow and it sounds scratchy. You can under rosin a bow and it doesn't sound properly. So it's like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. You can rosin the bow just right. What's the difference in quality sound between a normal Brazil wood bows, carbon fiber, and Pernambuco wood bows? Which would you recommend? Look, Brazil wood bows, the problem with Brazil wood bows is that the timber is actually not as hardy, so it'll lose its spring after about 30 years. But I do know soloists that actually prefer Brazil wood bows. All up, it doesn't really matter. There's some fantastic carbon fiber bows, fantastic Pernambuco, and fantastic Brazil wood bows. The trick is to try them all and see what works best for you and what makes the best sound. So most of the most expensive bows are Pernambuco bows. So a lot of the old, like the Tort and Satori and some of those really famous bows actually have Pernambuco wood. Hey Olaf, what's the most expensive violin you have ever repaired? Probably a $20 million instrument. It was a Guarnerius violin, very, very beautiful, and yeah, just had some issues that I repaired. It was an emergency as well. The soloist had a bit of an emergency, so I worked overnight for that one. Questions about violin care. I'm moving from a place with 0% humidity where I've lived my entire life. Both my instruments were made there, to a place with 50 to 70%. I've watched your humidity video and it was fantastic. it didn't talk about such drastic changes. What should I watch out for? What can I prevent? Well, obviously, as the ease the instrument into the high humidity. Don't just suddenly leave it open and expose it to the high humidity. Let it ease into it. It'll get used to it after a while. And then just watch out for any, like if the instrument sounds dull, there might be some open spots. So you might need a Violinmaker to work on that. If the humidity is really high, you have to be careful of the neck angle dropping. I did have another question. Someone said that their neck angle was right down, and you know, to that person, I actually answered in person, but get that looked at straight away. That should not be the case. So the neck probably needs to be reset, like the neck gets taken out. So what that question was is that the neck angle, this is the neck angle here, and that the fingerboard dropped right down onto the top plate, and that should never happen. Okay, so you've got to get that looked at and have the neck reset. So that means taking the neck out of here and resetting it to a different angle. I'll show you here. You can still see what it's like, but then there's like a mortise here that the neck fits into, and the neck basically fits into it like this. So the neck has to be taken out and then refitted at the right angle. Om Shanti, that's a beautiful name. It's actually a chant, like a spiritual chant. It's very special. Can you please show us the correct way to change the strings and what the point of attentions are while changing them? Bridge fine tuner strings are breaking while I'm installing them. I actually, about 11 years ago, I actually did a video on that, and it's really accurate. Have a look through my old videos and just do like, I think if you type in the correct changing violin string and the word Olaf, you should be able to come up with that video. Now, questions about violins. Sanchia, I don't have any questions. I just wanted to let you know my Salvatore Lombardi violin sounds really amazing and I truly love it. That's wonderful to hear. I sent that off a little while, and it's great to hear that it arrived okay and that she really loves it. This one. Clint asked a question. I bought a Cecilio CV500. Any info on these? Don't buy violins on Amazon. Seriously. I've had a really good look, and you know, unless it's sold through a violin shop, just don't do it. You know, like the instruments look like poorly set up, like they just look like they are with a Chinese setup. This one, I mean, some of them come with like Dario strings, and I mean, seriously, the strings themselves have about a quarter of the value of the whole instruments. A lot of those instruments are probably made in it's a city that's west of Shanghai, and they mass produce instruments there, and they are dreadful. Like, yeah, they are really not that good instruments. I just wouldn't go there. I understand that not everyone can spend $500-600 on an instrument, but if you can, you know, make sure the instrument is set up by a Violinmaker. It's just worth it. You know, you end up not having as many problems. Like when you play some of these instruments, they can basically make you sound not very good, and you can really struggle if things aren't set up right, and it can make you feel like you're the problem and you're not actually, like, you're not capable of learning violin, but that's not true, you know, when it's the instrument. So, you know, it's, I don't know, it's like trying to do a car race in a dodgy old car. I don't know. I just wouldn't do it. If you can avoid it, I understand that, you know, not everyone has the money, and if you're really excited about playing, at least get the string heights checked out and the string spacing, and get the sound post in the right place, if that's all you can do on a cheap, and if you can only afford a cheap violin. You know, it's all about, you know, understand that the violin is not reserved for rich people. Anyone can play it. It's such a beautiful instrument. Hi, Simply Two Setter. We have a lot of two set fans here, and I absolutely love what the guys do to get awareness up on stringed instruments. It's wonderful. I wonder, how should an adult beginner pick an instrument? What price range, brand quality should we look at? Also, if I start with a violin with 4 fine tuners, should I switch to one with 1 fine tuner after some years of playing? Thanks. The fine tuners don't really matter for starters. You know, like if you have a fine tuning tailpiece or just have 1 fine tuner, whatever is easiest, just do it. Just play violin. That's more important. I did actually do a video on how to choose an instrument. I also wrote a book called just a little book called The 7 Essentials You Need to Know When You're Buying an Instrument, and the link is actually in the description below. You can just sign up and get it. So you can either sign up and you actually get some extra emails with some more information, but you don't have to sign up. You can also just get the book, but that should help you a lot. Are there any more questions? Questions about sound. I missed all these. Sorry. Questions about sound. What's the difference between fine tuners to the sound, and what do you think about Tonerite to improve the sound of a violin? Okay, I just did a bit of research. I just had to pause this video and Google Tonerite. Interesting. Look, I haven't come across it. I know that different ways of playing an instrument can allow the instrument to respond differently, like it gets used to a player. I did that funny video a while ago, a story that my dad experienced, where a violinist came into his shop and just had him play the violin, and it sounded different afterwards. So,
hello.
hello.
I was wondering if you could play my violin for me, please.
Sure. So that can definitely happen, but it just sounds a bit gimmicky to me. I think it vibrates the instrument somehow, but it's kind of a bit scary. It's a bit heavy. Like if you accidentally drop it onto a nice instrument, that's scary stuff. So, but you know, I can't really comment on the Tonerite because I haven't played around with it. But it does sound a bit gimmicky, and I did notice some reviews where players actually played differently on the second, like you can actually tell that they're playing differently. So, I don't know. Fine tuners, when you have 4 fine tuners, it just adds a lot of weight to the tailpiece. So I always recommend a fine tuning tailpiece, and that way it's a similar weight to a timber tailpiece with a single fine tuners. So fine tuners have an effect on the sound. I have 4 fine tuners on my violin, but professionals have only 1. Why? Same thing. So, you know, there's no difference. Just don't worry about it. Have I ever come across Whitner fine-tuning pegs? Absolutely, I have. This is Chris. Thank you for the question. Look, they can be really good. I'm a bit old-fashioned. So, like when you get pegs that fit really nicely, they're actually not very hard to turn. And, you know, you could put peg paste on and things like that. They're actually fairly easy to turn. But if you're really struggling, then, you know, why not? They basically have a gearing system inside them. So you turn the peg faster and the bit with a string on it actually turns a bit slower. So it's quite clever. It's a clever design. I don't think they're the prettiest. You know, you can get much prettier timber pegs. But, you know, I don't have anything against them. I've fitted them for people, especially cellists, you know, because tuning up here, you can really do some damage to your tendons. And, you know, I know a lot of cellists with tendinitis. So, yeah, got to be careful with that kind of stuff. Liebe Grüße aus Deutschland. Hallo, liebe Grüße aus Australien. Sorry, I just broke into German. These things happen. Yeah, that's about all I have time for today. I think, you know, I hope I've answered your questions. I'm going to try and do these once a month. So I'm gonna just put out a call for questions, and I'll try and do these once a month. For me, this works better than live. Unfortunately, while Australia is definitely a first world country, the internet is not. And so streaming, like 4K streaming, is I really struggle with that. I did a couple of streaming videos and they looked shocking. So I'd rather connect with you where I'm not quite as pixelated. And so I'll answer your questions this way for now. And once the internet improves, just have a chat to our Prime Minister. He's can be a bit slow sometimes, but maybe one day we'll get there. They finally committed to net zero for 2050, which is a good way forward because we've got to look after the environment. Anyway, hope you like my t-shirt. I wore it specially for you and for my daughter who designed it. Yeah, and keep practicing, keep making beautiful music, keep having fun while you're playing. That's really important. Having fun, it's one of the most important things while you're playing because it relaxes you. When you practice so hard that it stops being fun, just stop. Put the instrument aside. You actually, when you're not having fun, when you're stressed, your mind doesn't actually absorb things. You can't learn things properly. So just put it down for a while. Play something that's fun. Yeah, so keep making beautiful music. Keep having fun while you're playing. If you like the video, hit the like button. I always appreciate it. I appreciate comments as well. Subscribe to my videos. When you subscribe, you actually find out every time I post a new video. Actually, you don't. You don't. You have to hit the little bell as well. So do that. Subscribe and hit the little bell, and then you'll find out. And, we all need more notifications, don't we? There's nothing quite like getting lots of notifications. But hey, when they come from me, it's definitely worth it. I promise. I pretty much only post good stuff and stuff that's going to help you if you're a string player. So anyway, it's nice chatting with you guys. Thanks so much for the questions. Thanks so much for the support. I really feel that I'm part of a community. You guys are great, and thanks so much for watching. I always appreciate it. See you guys. Bye.